Thank you. So I'm Gavriel with Helios, a Web3 VC investing in the EOSIO community, which includes blockchains, the likes of Wax, Telos, Ultra, EOS, Proton, Chintai, and more. This is a Helios Spotlight, speaking with Dan Larimer from Fractally. Very honored to be speaking with you, Dan. This is the first time. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. For those that don't know Dan, just a few background highlights. Dan was part of the original discussion forum with Satoshi, the inventor of Bitcoin, all the way back in 2010. Now with a long list of blockchain inventions, including the first decentralized exchange, the first stablecoin, the first decentralized social network, the first blockchain with 0.5 second blocks, and many more, and author of the book More Equal Animals, now founder of Fractally. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, so to me, your work is about building systems that help raise us beyond the law of the jungle, where might makes right, to something more respectfully and openly collaborative. Correct me where I'm wrong, or feel free to embellish. For the conversation today, I'll offer a very succinct summary of Fractally from what I've taken from the white paper, the website, and then we'll get into the conversation. So we're looking at I'd like to separate out the problem space to understand the context in which Fractally has emerged. Then we'll get to the solution space to actually understand what is Fractally, how does it operate, and then we'll look at blockchain applications, the kind of the financial or operating model that you've got so far with Fractally, and then we'll end up with some kind of a vision or perspective for the future. So hopefully that sounds good. So my little summary here, we're discussing the realm of, again, I've adapted this from the white paper, the website. So we're discussing the realm of turbocharging the creation of public goods. And I took that pretty much direct quote from the video the explainer video. And then B, this is done via collaboration that respectfully compensates our individual contributions, right? So I've got a direct quote here from the white paper. Fractally can be viewed as a massively multiplayer collaborative budgeting system that seeks to identify and reward the best contributions to a cause. And again, where a cause, from my reading, my understanding is that it's about public goods and mutual aid. So do you want to give us some color? Have I kind of summed up fairly? Is there more to it from a high level summary of what Fractally is?
I think you did a great job. You're obviously quoting me, so I can't complain there. The idea of public goods is actually very broad. It could include any open source project. Open source code is a public good. Every single blockchain has a community. Anyone who's contributing to the adoption and use of that blockchain is contributing to the public good of all token holders. So the idea is that nobody should be asking for something for nothing. And so that means if somebody is doing something to promote a currency, all token holders, all users of that currency benefit from that action. They should be recognized as such. And the challenge is, how do you recognize these contributions in a way that is credibly fair? And that's the problem that Fractally solves.
Fantastic. So let's get into that problem space. I got, again, some kind of specific questions to try and take us through unpacking the picture. Let's see how far we get through this long list of questions. We've got like 7 just for the problem space, but it's conversational. So let's just go with the curiosity factor. Before we get to the product features and benefits of how it works, we're exploring what Fractally is aiming to address, the context and the environment for Fractally, and then we'll get to solutions. So I guess to begin, again, we're going to have a mixed audience here, but just help us out and define in a basic way, what is public goods?
Yeah, public goods are things that it's hard to have a monopoly on and charge people. It's the free rider problem, right? People generally think of roads as a public good or security of a country as a public good. A lot of the things that we fund taxes, right? We tax people for, and then we fund, is considered public goods because in theory, people wouldn't buy them, or you can't, if one person's paying for it, everyone can benefit from it, which means that there's not a profit motive to produce public goods. Open source software might be the most obvious example. Coders are giving the software away for free, but they barely make any money from producing open source software unless they're like getting support and providing support. But all the work they're doing for free is uncompensated by society at large. And it can go to even other areas like media, right? Someone who's doing research and trying to share that information with the world, they're providing a service that everyone benefits from, the investigative research, the condensing of information, the ability to communicate it. But the only way that they can actually monetize it is by having advertisers, which then skews the media to the people who are paying their salaries and enabling them to do so. Versus if there was a way for people to agree that this journalism or this reporting or whatever, Wikipedia articles people are writing, they could agree that it provides value and recognize those people in a way that is actually in alignment with the consensus of the people, then it changes the game entirely. The problem we have today is public goods are provided by governments and large companies where there's someone that controls the whole narrative and it's not representative of the people. And they use that to control society or to determine what wins and what loses, whether or not it's actually benefiting people. So the value of public goods, the value of collaboration is being harnessed by the few and is being directed for the benefit of the few instead of everyone collaborating and then producing that new value and then distributing it back to the people that are actually producing the value. I guess the single biggest thing that people need to understand is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. When two people, let's use that example. You have a whole town, everyone has one brick. That brick's not providing a lot of value to anyone. If they all contribute their bricks to build a wall around the town, now everyone benefits from the security. The value of the security is greater than the value of the brick, even though security in that sense is a public good, because everyone in the town benefits whether or not they contributed a brick to the wall. And so it's actually possible to create value from nothing by collaborating. And now the question is, does everyone collaborate and we just put a wall around the palace? Or do we put a wall around the entire town? And the way we have things operating today is everyone contributes to the brick. The palace gets a great big wall. The rest of the town gets a wooden fence. And that's how public goods go today. I think Fractally can change that.
Okay, so great. Before we get into that solution space, you've touched on this. So we're talking about it can be applied to code. It's relevant to content creation, even down to roads and building brick walls for communities. These are all things that can be, a lot of times they are public goods, meaning they're not created necessarily just for a profit motive. So people are uncompensated. Tell me, expand a little bit more in terms of how does governance typically get done with regards to public goods today?
Yeah, so today we have like democracies as the way of handling it. And if you're not a democracy, you're in some kind of kingdom or oligarchy or whatnot, where there's some set of rulers and they're passing the laws and the regulations and they're raising money from taxes and they're spending that tax money in theory for the benefit of all the people. That's the justification they give for taxing, is they're producing more value for the people than the tax money that they're raising. The problem is that there's moral hazard in the decision making. It's hard to spend other people's money responsibly, and in fact, it's impossible. The other problem is the voting systems that we have today favor political parties, incumbent advantage. The people who control the media end up controlling who's on the ballot. All those things conspire to create a very small group of people where a fraction of a percent actually end up controlling the whole population, because the Pareto distribution of power, influence, and money are what's governing how our leaders are selected. The other problem, since we're dealing with the problem space, is how do we actually tap the wisdom of the crowds to identify the best from among us? Because the information is distributed across the entire population. Most people don't even want to get into politics. They don't want to get into governance. They don't want to be involved in their HOA. They just want to be left alone, which then causes the ambitious few to advance. And I guess another aspect of our democratic processes is rational ignorance. The value of your vote is so small relative to the cost of acquiring the information necessary to cast it responsibly. Furthermore, no one person, even doesn't matter who you are, can have all the information necessary to make the best decisions. So even the idea of trying to have everyone vote on the one person who's going to be best is a problem. So we need to tap the wisdom of the crowds to gather information in as decentralized way as possible without getting the choke points of it all having to funnel through one person who is making the calls. But you can actually leverage the information that is distributed in everyone's minds without requiring everyone to be educated on everything, which just does not scale. And today's governance and voting processes all assume all voters are educated on everything so that they can select the leader who knows everything. That's just not aligned with reality, and that's why we end up with tyranny.
Good. Okay, so like perhaps more on the personal side, why do you personally focus your attention on the public goods side of things versus, for want of a better word, the private goods side of things? Why is public goods your emphasis at the moment?
Well, private goods are a free market, voluntary exchange. And the idea with private good, if I'm making something, I can control who gets it. I can make sure that I get compensated, or I keep it, or I don't produce it. And so there's already a profit motive there for private goods. But when it comes to public goods, there's not a profit motive to produce it. And so it's just a much harder problem. And I think there's a relationship between the individualism, which is private, and collectivism, which is, no man's an island, right? If you're living alone on an island, you're not going to have a very good quality of life. You need to cooperate with other people. But then when you're cooperating with other people, you don't want to be slave to the people. So you have to have this tension between the group needs to protect the independence of the individual, and the individual needs to cooperate with the group in order for the individual to maximize their quality of life. And it's finding that tension. Typically what happens is the group gets corrupted, and some leader of the group maximizes the leader's quality of life, and the individuals in the group end up unable to change their leader, unable to do anything about the fact that they're part of a group that's abusing them. And that is why we periodically get revolutions and everything burns down, because it's the only way we know to reset the system, and then we can start to rebuild. So I'm hoping that with a better consensus building system that values the principles of individual independence and community independence in a fractal structure could be more stable long-term, and we can break out of the cycle of increasing complexity and centralization followed by complete collapse and then reset. And then maybe humanity can reach new heights that we never could reach before, because we keep burning everything down every 50 to 100 years.
So it's not that you're opposed to business or private goods in any way. It's that you see a bigger opportunity or a bigger problem, a challenge to solve within the sphere of public goods, and you see that as having a much bigger impact on serving the future for humanity, basically.
I'm fundamentally for voluntary exchange and avoiding the use of violence. That's the motivating factor. I believe free markets are very, very efficient ways of allocating resources. And I believe that collaborating with others is the best way to maximize your own independence and your own ability to value. So I believe there's value in collaboration. The question is, how do free and independent people voluntarily interact in a way that allows them all to thrive and none of them to become subservient to the group? And so that's, the socialists, they got some things right. The capitalists, they've got some things right. But if you apply either one of them to the extreme, and things start to fall down, and you don't just mix them the way we kind of mix them, where we tax them, we do this, and with systems kind of evolve towards socialism and communism and collapse as people want more and more free stuff and they become more and more dependent. That's not how I am, and I'm not like completely against community guidelines, community governance. We need to be able to coordinate our actions to act as one. That's how single cell organisms turn into multi-cell organisms. That's how humans can be part of a larger society that's even more capable as a society than we would be as individual single cell organisms. So I see it as the next step in the evolution of society and creating higher and higher life forms where you can actually have people organize collectively, like your brain, and come to a consensus on how to control your entire body for the benefit of all the cells in your body. That's the analogy here. And the people that are hardcore anarcho-capitalist libertarian, they say every cell is an island and we don't need to be part of a body. And the socialist says, well, forget the independence of the cells. Every cell must be identical and must conform and so forth. So there's a tension that needs to be balanced, and that's the problem I'm trying to solve.
So that makes a lot of sense from that problem space perspective. Maybe we'll come back a little bit. There was just remembered, it doesn't take a blockchain to build a wall or a road. So Fractally is not only focused, again, correct me if I'm wrong or give us some color, but it's not just about applying Fractally to existing blockchain solutions, although that might become part of how communities govern and manage in the future. But there's still much wider application to Fractally than just blockchain, correct?
Absolutely. I wrote my book, More Equal Animals, as a solution for society, and I even presented a way of using the principles to organize a church or a town or a county or a state using nothing but a deck of playing cards. It does not need to be based on technology. This is about human coordination. The technology is just a tool to enable it. If you think about what blockchains actually enable, is people who don't know each other to come to consensus and just allow a computer to authenticate and validate information for them. That sort of implies a sort of logical centralization, a situation where you're not dealing with people, but you're just dealing with numbers. And it's very, I guess, counter to the idea of fractal governance. In a fractal governance system, you want local as possible. You want as much power and as much decisions and as much independence at a local level as possible. When you're local, you actually know people. And if you've read the book Blueprint, The Evolutionary Basis of a Good Society, it talks about how identity, the ability to identify people, and reputation is actually critical to the evolution of what we consider society today. And that as you move toward being anonymous and eliminating reputation, you actually are devolving lower in the evolutionary, in the evolution of social creatures. The reason Bitcoin has that is because governments are so overpowering that they target any individual who attempts to do anything. So you need the privacy, you need the security to protect yourself from the government. The problem is that in the name of protecting yourself from the government, they're all public and they get all the benefit of the public collaboration. Now you're trying to be all private, and that's devolving. We need to have better ways of reaching consensus that can still occur in public, and in order to move beyond and create better structures than the governments we have today. You're not going to be able to create a better system than today's governments and today's corporations on the basis of anonymous interaction.
That is very interesting. Okay, I feel we've kind of unpacked some of the detail in that problem space. Let's start to transition specifically to solution space. So, question here, again, looking for that broad value proposition as you describe it. What is the value proposition for users of Fractally specifically that warrants them to invest their time into the weekly meetings that are part of the system and the effort that it will take to establish and onboard those Fractally teams? What is the actual value proposition?
The value proposition is that I call collaborative value that's only realized when people come together. It's like there's gold in the mountain, and the only way that we can get that gold is if we all collaborate. And so you show up every week because you want to get your cut of the gold that it's actually being created by the collaboration. One person cannot go out there and get the gold out of that mountain. It's only made possible by collaboration. And the value of that gold is greater than the sum of the value of each individual's contribution. So why contribute? Because you're producing value for not just yourself, but for everyone. And you're producing more value for yourself, in theory, if you're collaborating well with others, producing things that everyone agrees is valuable to each other. You're producing more value for yourself than the value of the time you're contributing, which means we're making public goods profitable.
So is there a distinction or comparison between, say, a local community gets together and they have a council meeting and they say, hey, folks, we need to build a road because we're suffering with the mud and the slides and the rain and whatever. And so let's get together and go out and build a road, or start to build infrastructure for the community. What is kind of the value proposition difference of Fractally? Maybe that's a big question, I'm not sure, compared to what they might do just kind of getting together and trying to get something done as a public good.
All right. So typically, one way that people organize today is, let's put all of our money into a company, have the company build the road and charge tolls. All right. That's a profit-driven model. You've created a private resource that's exclusive, that you can exclude people from. And so that can actually be provided by the free market under a voluntary exchange situation. And it's very clear how that works and the incentives for everyone. If you believe that there's going to be demand for travel between 2 points that people were willing to pay for, and it's going to be more cost effective than, flying or boat or whatever other thing, you build the road. But if you take something else that's incredibly valuable to a free society, which is quality information, well, who's going to go get the information and publish the information, right? And today, the way that would work is people would get together and they would say, let's start a newspaper. We're going to raise money. We're going to hire journalists, and we're going to pay them to produce articles, and then we're going to sell ads to other people. That business model is dependent upon the people willing to pay for ads. So you're getting an audience that's somewhat exclusive to you, and your goal is to maximize the audience to maximize the value of the ads. And in theory, the audience is watching your content because they value the content you're producing. But it puts the newspaper or the media organization in the role of editor. And not only that, it puts the ads, people who control the ads, in the role of editor. And who controls the ads? Well, the people who control the central bank, which controls the funding to the companies, which then fund the ads, which means it all boils down to the information that's available to everyone is controlled not by what the people want, but by what the people in power want them to consume. So they might have, there's a window of content that they're allowed, and they can appease consumers to that, but they can't go outside the official narrative or their funding gets cut, right? So it's they're not accountable to the people. They're accountable to the people paying the bills. And without the ad-supported revenue, the only other model is donations. And donations is an altruistic form where some people pay the people who are producing content because they really appreciate what they're doing and they want to sponsor them. And if no one funded it, then that might stop. And so you have a very small percent of people donating to fund the public good of researching information contrary to official narrative, right? This could be scientific research even, right? Who's doing the experiments that the government doesn't want done? No one. Or if they are, then it's not well funded, and then how's anyone going to verify and vet it? So that's the problem, and that's the solution, right? Fractally allows people to reach consensus on the subjective value of the public goods that are being created, so that the producers are rewarded according to how well they serve the public's consensus, rather than how well they serve the shareholders who own what they're doing. And as an editor or a journalist, now you can make money serving the people, and that's why you want to be involved. And all the so that's the basic thing. It comes down to enabling people to make money by producing things everyone values.
Yeah, so there's a lot in there. So I got a few questions that will help to expand on that. Let's touch on the idea of a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. Before I ask you to describe essentially what that is for the viewers who may not be into blockchain yet, you've described Fractally as an evolution of a DAO. Just give us like a succinct idea of what is the common idea of a DAO versus what you see as being new in terms of what a DAO is.
Sure. The term DAO, decentralized and autonomous, was created by me to describe Bitcoin. Bitcoin could be viewed as a DAO that incentivizes the creation of custom chips to perform certain cryptographic operations, SHA hashing. And people come together and they're motivated to create all this infrastructure to achieve a particular end without any real governance, without any pool of money, but just the incentives are aligned to produce a particular end, and everyone benefits. And so it's, the organization's autonomous. It makes its own decisions. It's not accountable to any particular jurisdiction. It's decentralized. There's no single person in control. And so that's a decentralized and autonomous organization. To contrast that with a centralized, non-autonomous organization, let's start. What did we have before Bitcoin? We had e-gold. They had a vault with a bunch of gold in it that the governments could come. They took all the gold. They shut down the business. It was centralized. The assets backing it could be shut down. It was not autonomous. It was dependent upon the broader system. So, being autonomous kind of means being sovereign. So a DAO is an algorithm or a consensus process that it's a process for reaching consensus over a set of information where people value that information. And it's completely sovereign over that information. No government, no individual can make the information disappear because it's public and it's replicated everywhere. So the information is decentralized, it's valued. No single person or a small group of people has the ability to change the information. And at any time, the information can be forked, and you're not going to have two versions of the DAO, one like Bitcoin Cash, the other Bitcoin, Ethereum Classic. A DAO can be forked because it's just information, and the value of each fork is decided by the market. How much is the market, the individuals, how much do they value the information that's in that set of consensus? And that's how DAOs govern themselves.
Okay, so let me interrupt you there. So my perspective on a DAO to date has been about automation. I see it as a very well automated system. The Fractally white paper seems to position differently. I've got a quote: "You're replacing objective proof of work, which to me is easier to automate, replacing that objective proof of work with subjective proof of work." So subjectivity is harder to automate than objectivity, right? You're not doing away with smart contract solutions, but Fractally operates at the level of a human-to-human negotiation. So it's not about automation. How else do you understand Fractally's approach to a DAO?
It's both. So I introduced the concept of a smart organization as like eGold is a company. It could be run on a blockchain. It would be entirely automated. You can even use cryptographic primitives for going back and forth. You can even reach consensus to make sure there's no double spending of the gold. So all of eGold on the blockchain. But because it's backed by actual gold, the gold is centralized, it's dependent, it's not autonomous. It's a smart organization, it's an automated organization, but it's not an autonomous or sovereign organization. And so there's huge value to have workflow processes automated. In fact, there's companies that have been doing it for 20, 30 years since the invention of the internet, where you can track share ownership in your business. You can have QuickBooks that tracks all the accounting within your business. The supply chains are completely automated, even without a blockchain. So automated workflow processes is something that we've been doing for a long time, but and doing it on a blockchain adds a little extra level of integrity, adds a little bit of extra security, but doesn't fundamentally change it to make it decentralized or autonomous. They're just smart organizations secured by cryptography that may or may not be transparent, but nevertheless, they're centralized and not autonomous. So I think smart organizations are huge. Smart contracts enable you to put them on public blockchains, and they can operate in that way. But a decentralized autonomous organization is a blockchain. It's a blockchain protocol. It's pure information, and it has no legal basis because it's just a consensus of people. It's not property rights. It's not anything else. And that's why it's autonomous. It's because it's just information that people value. Because why do they value it? Because a lot of people have consensus that is the true information. And so I like to differentiate between smart automated organizations, which foundations and even things like the Eden process on EOS, which was pioneered some of the governance process in Fractally. Because it's dealing with the EOS token and allocating it, it's not autonomous. It depends on funding from EOS Network Foundation. The EOS Network is autonomous, but the Eden was not because it doesn't have its own token. Likewise, the thing that we all consider the DAO on Ethereum, it was a smart contract on Ethereum. It held Ethereum in its treasury, and its goal was to reach consensus in an automated process on how to allocate funds to fund different venture capital type of things. When there was a bug with the smart contract and all the Ethereum backing it got transferred out, which is not really the intent of the parties, but that's what the code allowed to happen. We discovered that the DAO was not autonomous. And the only way that they could resolve it was to fork all of Ethereum. Ethereum was a DAO because it was autonomous. The DAO was a smart organization calling itself a DAO. Mm-hmm. And I get particularly upset when people misuse or generalize DAO because they use the term DAO so Apple could call itself a DAO as long as they completely automated all their shareholding voting on a blockchain. Apple doesn't automatically become a DAO just because it's automated and all actions are on a blockchain. And so we need different words so that we can communicate clearly different ideas without having to say, well, this type of DAO has, big long sentence. No, this is a DAO, this is not. So the simplest way to think about it is a DAO can be forked. It's pure information, and a smart organization can't be forked.
Very cool. So then let's segue to how Fractally is an evolution of a DAO.
Okay. So Fractally is an evolution of a DAO, because like you said earlier, it allows for subjective consensus, whereas historically DAOs relied on objective measures of consensus.
Okay. So it's that subjective proof of work. So let's go into a little bit of the operational mechanism of Fractally. So the nuts and bolts. I've got here, I summed it up, I think, as negotiation for compensation in the form of a reward, a respect token, right? So it's a negotiation for compensation, and the compensation is respect token. A couple of quotes from the white paper: 5-minute time slots to present each person's contribution, and the group can use any process that they like to reach consensus. Can you give us some examples of what those processes might be? What are the possibilities for reaching consensus?
Yeah, so, first of all, let's deal with respect. Respect is a general term. All property rights are respect for other people. I respect you by not stealing it from you, by not using violence against you, right? So the fact that I acknowledge and we all agree that you own this computer or this money or whatever, that's all just a form of respect. So property rights and respect go hand in hand. Within Fractally, we use the term respect kind of as an abstract form of money. So each community will have its own type of money. So for example, Bitcoin is the respect of the Bitcoin community. EOS is the respect of the EOS community. Each fractal, which is a community under Fractally, the many fractals will have its own currency. Each fractal will have consensus on what they're going to call their currency. Pesos or dollars, or is it going to be something coin or something token? So respect is a abstract way of just saying, hey, property rights, we're not going to fight. We're going to value each other. Respect means to value, and I think that there's some confusion over the meaning of respect, because people are like, well, you can't buy respect, because people have value on themselves, and you can't sell your value as a person to someone else. But the things you have value and can be respected as well, and you can sell that, and you can buy other forms of respect. So let's get back to the process. The process is, everyone's done something. All right, so that's one thing we know at the very start. And all value is relative value, right? So, take money or dollar value out of it. We don't care about the absolute market value of something. We just know that, hey, everyone put some level of effort in, and some people put in more than others. And so the task before us is to take, a group of people that are just a random crowd and say, hey, sort yourself by age. Right? That would be one way of saying it. And how are you going to get a group of people to sort themselves by age? One way is, hey, everyone tell your age to somebody, they're sorted, and they tell you where to go in line. But we want to do this in a decentralized way. And we also, I guess, want to do something more subjective. Age is potentially objective, assuming you have birth certificates. But suppose you didn't have birth certificates, right? And now you ask people, sort yourself by age, and no one knows exactly when they were born. All right, now that's a more challenging problem. And so what we do is we group people into 6, and we ask each group, sort yourself. And you reach consensus in your group, and all the groups are sorting themselves from what they think. And that's a local problem, right? You don't need global information, right? You don't need to know what everyone else, the thousands of other people in your community are doing. You just have to talk among your 6 and reach consensus in that small set. And instead of saying, well, what you did is worth $100 and what you did is worth $5, which would be much, much harder, say, no, you did the most, you did the least, and this is the order. And then once we have that ranking, now we can fit that to a token distribution. And we base that on the Fibonacci sequence, which means the sum of the 2 people below you is equal to how much you get. And that results in something sort of like a Pareto distribution, where about 1/3 of the people get about 2/3 of the tokens. And that's actually lines up with reality that, well, about 1/3 of the people end up doing 2/3 of the work, or they end up producing 2/3 of the value. And so we're asking people to reach consensus on a ranking, which will then approximate the value in reality, and we're trying to map that as closely as possible.
Okay, so I've got a little bit on that to expand as well. Just to clarify that the Fractally meetings are not about agreeing the future work to be done. It's about negotiating the compensation for work that has been done already, so that the team will still have other types of meeting, like agile methodology for software development, or bosses and managers assigning tasks to be done. It's a different type of meeting for a specific purpose of compensation negotiation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's several different ways people collaborate. And you can think of one as a team-based collaboration. You're working with the same people day after day, right? And these are small teams, like 6 to 12 people. And those are the people you build the strongest relationships with. They know you the best. But it's really hard for everyone to keep tabs on what everyone is doing. So there's a need for communities to, I guess, cross-pollinate ideas, meet other people in the community. And that's what the weekly meetings are for. The weekly meetings are an opportunity for you to be randomly assigned with 5 other people from all the other people in the community to learn what they're doing and to share what you're doing, so you get to know each other. If you're not on a team yet, it's a good opportunity to discover teams you might want to join, to discover products you might want to adopt, services that people might be providing to the community that are interesting to you. So the weekly meetings are about sharing ideas, and the teams are about collaborating together to produce value. And when you attend in the weekly meeting, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the team that you're on. And so people aren't just ranking your contributions, right? We're ranking contributions here, we're not ranking people. And that's something that is a subtlety that makes a big difference in how people respond, right? Because I don't get offended if I'm ranked lowly for compensation if I haven't done anything compared to someone else, because I can objectively or subjectively tell that, well, they actually did more than me, and I can agree that I should be on the bottom of this ranking, and I won't feel bad about it. But if they're saying, no, you're a bad person, then that gets very personal, and that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to say who's more valuable than who. We're trying to say whose contributions are less recognized than other people's contributions. And of course, we're looking backward. So none of this, who's making the biggest promises, which is what politicians do. They'll promise you the future of, chicken in every pot and unlimited benefits. And then they get votes that way. But the only way you can actually get any rankings is to actually do things. You give to the community first, and then the community reaches consensus on whether or not what you gave is valued by everyone else.
Okay, so I didn't realize that it's randomly selected. So every meeting, every week, you're going to be mixed in with a different group of people that are part of the community, but also that you're not just representing, you're not just negotiating for the contribution that you as an individual have made, but it is the team that is, like maybe it's the front end development team, or that you're representing in that meeting with a handful of randomly selected other people from the overall community, which might be an organization. So, okay, interesting clarifications there. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of rounds. So we're following the Fibonacci sequence. In the first round, the lowest pecking order position for respect tokens is 1 token, and the highest of that round is 13 respect tokens. So somehow the group is having to agree that one person's or connected related teams contribution is 13x greater than the lowest contributed person. The challenge then for me,
for example, let's assume you have a team where everyone did the exact same thing. They all retweeted 1 tweet for the community that week, something small. People still have to reach consensus on an order, because we basically say you're not allowed to be equal, and we want to create incentive for everyone to always say, you know what, this week I'm going to do just a little bit more, so if I'm ever in a group where everyone did 1 tweet, well, I did 2 tweets, and by virtue of being 2 tweets, I clearly win and I go up to the top. And it's not about the results of any 1 week. It's about averaging over time. So for example, let's say you're randomly assigned to a group that has all the top devs on there, right? You got all the celebrities in the crypto space happen to be randomly assigned to the group, and then there you are, and you're just someone who follows along online, and you just show up for the weekly meetings. Or maybe you did a lot this week, but nowhere near as much as the celebrity superstars that are in the group that you're in. Well, you're not going to necessarily advance. Not everyone can be 13. Right? Even if everyone might be deserving of 13, but that's okay, because over time you're going to average out. And the only way that you actually maximize your results is to have lots of different people. So you're not just being judged by 5 people, you're being judged by 100 people over 20 weeks, or 200 people over 40 weeks, right? So hundreds of people a year are evaluating your contribution to the community, and your average is more important than the results of any particular week. It's kind of like Bitcoin mining. Some weeks you might produce a lot of blocks, and some weeks you might not produce any. But your work is steady, right? That's why you have mining pools. Or you can kind of view teams as little mini mining pools where everyone on the team might be working equally and they all getting different results. They pull resources and they figure out amongst themselves, because they work with each other every day, they see each other's work, on how to divide up the team's allocation among the participants on the team. And that team is an opportunity to balance out and to hold people accountable in ways that you can't hold random people that you meet every single week accountable from week to week. So teams will have reputation, individuals will have reputation, but the ranking is just about sorting greatest to least. It's not about saying, well, you deserve 13 and you deserve 1. No, it says you're top dog in this, you did more than everyone else and you did the least of everyone. And then the respect earned, the tokens earned, is just based on the ranking, and that's just part of the averaging function.
Okay, so the averaging function, that helps give some perspective. Over time, you'd hope that things will balance out so that people aren't just keep earning 1 token versus someone who's earning 13x more. That helps. Then maybe you can help me understand the rounds 2 and 3. I guess as the community, as the organization gets bigger, there's more people in the mix and you're doing these multiple rounds. The problem that I've got in understanding is by the time you get to round 3, the top allocation is 2,584 points. The previous round was 207 plus the 13 from round 1. We've got 2,804 points.
They don't accumulate like that.
Uh-huh.
You're basically going up in the ranks. So the first round, you identify people that are 1 through 6. Everyone who is ranked 6 goes to another round, and they'll sort themselves 6 through 11, I think. Yeah. And then all the 11s will go to the next round. They'll rank themselves 11 through 17 or 16. And so now the end result is everyone has a rank assigned, and then you take that rank in the Fibonacci sequence to figure out how many tokens they should get.
Okay.
Now, this is where it's particularly relevant that you're not ranking people, you're ranking their contributions. So, for example, if you spend $1 million of your own money to fund a huge ad campaign, that's a contribution to the public good that is objectively more than someone else who maybe just worked full-time that week. There's $1 million full-time work. So your contribution to the community can be more than your labor. It can be more than the value of your time. You could be employing hundreds of people for the benefit of the community. And that's why the compensation still goes nonlinear with the Fibonacci's, because it allows for the people that are the super organizers that are funding big organizations, entire teams working under them. That's their contribution to the community, compared to somebody whose contribution to the community is, I show up 1 hour a week for a meeting and I do nothing in between. That's the minimum unit of compensation, is I show up. Why do I show up? Well, I'm just helping reach consensus on what's valuable. And I'm giving up an hour of my time. That's the base unit of compensation. Whereas the maximum person, well, not only am I working full time, I'm employing 40 full-time people as well. And so now 1 hour versus 40 full-time equivalents. And now you can start to see how and why. And what ends up happening is, at the higher levels, you've got a group of 6 people. Each of them is maintaining a team of 10. And now they have to rank which of our teams of 10 is doing more or less for the community. So it gets higher and higher level, bigger and bigger stakes, but also more and more capable people are advancing.
Okay.
What I'd like to add is, in the white paper, I talked about going up to 5 rounds. Based on experimentation and further thinking, I believe we're going to cap it at 3 rounds. which means that the people that earn the most have to do well over time. And it's not going to be, there's going to be more people that make it to the top each week. And then instead of winner takes all.
So the person who's managing the group of 10 are the respect tokens still going to that one person who is the manager, or is he going and distributing it across the 10 members of his team?
All right, well, there's two aspects here. You have a team, you're a member of the team, and you're representing yourself. And your team gets matching, right? So if you get 10 respect tokens, your team also gets 10 respect tokens. If I'm employing 10 people and I'm a part of a team, right? Imagine you have a team of companies, right? And the CEO of each of those 10 companies is on that team. So you've got 6 companies forming a team of 6. Each of those people, now you got basically 60 people involved. Each CEO is attending the weekly meeting, or a representative of the CEO is attending the weekly meeting. And they're advocating for both their direct compensation for their 10 employees, but also for the team compensation, which is a team of companies. So there's lots of different ways that people can aggregate in here, but that funds that they get, half of it's going to go to them directly to do whatever they want and to pay their employees however they want. Other half goes to their official team on the network, where the team the team members have to reach consensus on which individuals get their cut of the team, and then on down. So it's modular in how it flows.
Okay. So let me get to the challenge, the question that I had, and relate back to all of what you're explaining. So with the round 3, you've clarified there's 2,584 points for the top dog in round 3. A side question, just to clarify, if that is a manager of 10 people, are all of those 10 people necessarily part of the Fractally system? They're in a meeting of their own, or might he just be representing them and take back the respect tokens and distributing it as he sees fit, but they're not necessarily participating, correct?
If all of his team members are also participating in the system, the community would have to subjectively consider, hey, those team members are being compensated by other means, and he's not the one that's paying them. But if there are a bunch of people that don't care about Fractally at all, right? He's hiring contractors to write code, or he's spending money to do ads. The people that he's spending money on have no idea Fractally exists. He's being compensated. He's with respect with the tokens. He can sell those tokens, or some of them, to pay the people that he's paying, and hopefully he's getting more respect than he's incurring in real world expenses, or he's not contributing to the community profitably, or maybe he's looking long term, as I'm investing my time and attention in the community, and in the long run I expect this respect to be worth something, but in the short term it's just my contribution to what's going on.
Okay, that also helps. So here's the punchline, the challenge that I came to, right? So with the round 3, you got 2,584 points. In 2018, the top 50 US CEOs on average earned $37 million each, right? If we just assume that the lower paid workforce on average in those kind of huge companies, they're earning $37,000 a year. So $37,000 a year to $37 million is 1,000x difference. In the Fractally system, by round 3, you've got a 2,584 to 1 ratio. So it's still double.
But it's not time. You have to subtract off the cost of the people that were at the top. Now, with CEOs, they're getting X amount of money and they're not having any costs, right? So you're looking at just their profits as the salary of the CEOs. But what we're really looking at here is those people might get this, $50 million, but they might spend $60 million in whatever it is that they were doing for the community, and so still be at a loss. So you can't just look at what their revenue is, you have to look at what their profits are. And so that's a huge difference. So we're saying the revenues might scale by that factor, but profits are not necessarily scaling the same because their costs are not going to be linear. And that's what the people are subjectively evaluating, is who did the most relative for the respect earned. And so if two people are competing and one of them's keeping half of it for themselves and just spending $1 million a year, the other spending $5 million a year, and they get the same ranking, well, one's going to be more likely to win over and over and over again, and the other one is going to be at a slight disadvantage because they're taking a higher salary, but not necessarily doing more. So the only way to win over and over and over is to do more than everyone else. And the theory is the top 50 CEOs that you mentioned are all doing the same as everyone else, but we know that's not the case.
Yeah. Okay. So on surface level, the challenge there is that the there might be some disagreement or debate on the person at the lowest end of the pecking order. Round one, he got one respect token, and then someone else by round three, they're getting these 2,500 odd respect tokens. There may be a sense of it being unfair, depending on the shape and size and dimension of the actual organization, right?
Any particular week is guaranteed to be unfair because we're fitting people to a ranking and distributing, and people might be equal. It could equally be as unfair as, because it's random, the top 5 contributors are all in the same group, right? They've all contributed $10 million, and one of them is only getting 1 unit of respect this week. Well, sucks to be them. This week was not fair to them because they earned no tokens, or relatively few tokens, compared to the amount they contributed, just because they happen to be randomly grouped. But the value cannot be measured in any given week. It's measured over time. The person who's reliably spending money on a team is going to be reliably ranking higher than the people who are not doing that. And that's part of the security of the system, because you have to appease, each group that you're in is like a jury. It's a random selection of your peers, and they're going to judge you. Now, some juries, they're going to judge you relative to each other, right? So it's a little bit interesting there. But some juries might be unfair, but some juries might be stacked with a bunch of really good candidates. And sometimes a jury might have a bunch of people that all did nothing, and somebody gets lucky and gets 13 respect for doing nothing, just because they happen to be grouped with 5 other people that did nothing that particular week. It's just like Bitcoin mining. Everyone can put the same amount of electricity and get very different results in any particular week, but averaged over enough time, and you'll find that your income from Bitcoin mining approaches the level of effort that you put in. And that's why you don't want to just look at 1 week. You need to look at it over time.
Okay, so we are still talking about the realm of public goods, which I see operating differently from the world of private goods. There's more of an expectation of we're doing goodwill, right? It's gamifying goodwill participation to do something greater that, like you said, I've got 1 brick, I can't really do anything, but if I get together, I can have a big effect. And you're suggesting that over time, the compensation should average out relatively fairly, based on a goodwill, based on a public goods kind of contribution initiative. So
based on the consensus of the people, right? Because what you're doing is you're measuring people's opinion over time, and people's opinion changes over time, right? But it's a mass of people, and some people, they value different things, and so how do you measure something like that? It's a very fuzzy thing to try to even measure, and so you've got to behave and contribute in ways that on average, that if you did a random sampling, people are going to value. And if you do that, then you will win in the system because you're predicting what a random sampling of the people will value. And because they're random sampling, they're not your friends. They can't be buddy. Hey, I'm going to give you money every week. No, it's a random sampling of your peers, and they're all contributing as well. And so you have to reach consensus on what's fair as best as we can, given the information that we have. And so it's a very, very different system. In a private society, a private market, private goods situation, if you don't like the price, you don't sell it, right? And so now you know that you're getting a fair price because it's a voluntary exchange and you didn't have to sell. In a public goods situation, the buyer is the public. The buyer is not one person. And that means you got to measure public opinion of how much are they willing to pay for the good provided. And that's something that how does a mass mob of people negotiate with one person who's trying to do something for them? The only thing the person can do is, I'm going to do this for you guys, and then you guys reach consensus how much you value it. And if I did well, then I'm rewarded. If I did poorly, then that was the risk I took. So each person becomes an entrepreneur attempting to provide things that their community will value.
Okay, good. So we've discussed the meetings and the voting bit. There's also the aspect in the white paper of rewards for posting content. Can you give us a little bit of a perspective on that component?
Yeah. So this idea is a derivative of what I created with Steemit, which is now known as hive.blog. And you have a group of people, they're submitting content. And when you submit content, you're actually asking for other people to read it. You're asking for their attention. And the people that are reviewing this content, they've got scarce attention. So you actually put down a little bit of respect up front, which says that I think more people are going to appreciate the content that I'm contributing than not appreciate it. And if they don't, right, it's determined spam, then I don't get any of my money back. But if they do, then I get half my money back, guaranteed. And then, depending on how many votes I get, I can get more than the amount of money I put in. So if I get more votes than other contributors, I make more than them. And so you're producing content, you're trying to produce the best content you can to get as many votes as you can. And you're competing against all the other people contributing content. And you're risking a little bit, so there's not going to be a bunch of spam. Now, what makes Fractally different than Hive and Steem is that instead of being stake weighted, right, which is how many tokens you have determines your vote, this is based on participation weighted. Your ranking in the weekly meetings, right? Did you get rank 1 or did you get rank 30 or 16 or whatever the highest rank is? What's your average ranking over time? That determines your weight, which means there's much less disparity between the smallest and the least, right? Maybe a 16x disparity compared to, say, Steem. We got a Pareto distribution where 1% of the people have 51% of the tokens, and they are just dominating what's happening. And there's no accountability to the people that are voting. So if you have the whales, people with all the tokens, if they decide that they want to allocate more inflation to themselves and they want a bigger slice of a smaller pie, they can do that. And that's what happened on Hive and Steem. But within Fractally, if you're a voter and you're voting on content that's garbage, but it's just an attempt to reward your friends, that's going to get known. And then you're going to start doing poorly in the weekly meetings because now you're causing a form of harm in addition to any positive, right? Offsetting harm. And or you have an alternative revenue stream for which they don't feel like they need to compensate you. Your rankings go down, which means your vote weight goes down, which then limits your ability to continue to abuse the voting system to allocate content rewards. So we've got real identity. That's the other thing that makes it different. Because when you're grouped with random people, all the meetings occur at the same time. You can't attend 2 meetings at the same time without a whole lot of technological effort, which means abuse is going to be extremely small, which makes it truly democratic compared to Steem or Hive, where you can have any number of accounts with tokens on it and you vote, and it's just a matter of selling votes with a little bit of public good, right? Some votes are cast altruistically, and to that extent, Hive and Steem is working, which is why they're still around and worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But there's a large amount of graft and gamemanship on top of it. Fractally tries to solve that problem by having real identity and having reputation, ranking people.
Okay, so let's little bit advance in the conversation in terms of onboarding. So if I'm a content creator, it's not about joining a team. Am I signing up for a new website that you're going to have as a social? Is it a new social network? Is it a new media content platform where I can sign up and start contributing content? And then in terms of the team, what is the current or the future onboarding process for a team that wants to do some public good creation? How do they register? How do they actually just start? In a succinct summary.
Let's start with, there's two questions there. One was team and get involved, and the other was how do you invite people? So as a content producer, half of everything you earn goes to your team. And then your team has to divide it. So content producers are encouraged to team up. That's assuming that I guess there's two types of people that can be producing content. There's people participating in the governance, right, which is limited to 7,776. That's the maximum of people that can participate. Those are the people that can join teams. Those are the people that participate in the weekly meetings. If you don't want to participate in any of that, you're an outside contributor, which is open to anyone on the internet. What you do is you buy some respect tokens and you use them to put down the deposit on the content you're submitting. The people who are participating in governance are the ones that are voting on how to rank your content. And that will determine how much you get paid. And in that case, you're not on a team, and so you get to keep what you get paid for your content as an outside submission, which is how that works. Now, inviting people. Anyone can form a team by suggesting that several other people who aren't already on a team join your team. You can only be on one team per fractal. There are many fractals, right? So keep in mind that there can be a Bitcoin fractal, an EOS fractal, and an Ethereum fractal. And you could, in theory, participate in governance in all three, as long as they don't schedule their governance meetings to occur at the same time. So that's a way for, if two fractals don't want to allow any overlap, they just schedule it at the same time, and now people have to choose. But otherwise, if you're willing to attend multiple meetings and whatnot, you can attend multiple fractals, and each fractal has its own voting pool and their own token. And so you can even submit the same article, same digital content, to multiple fractals. This content is hosted on a website. Fractally.com will host all the content for all the fractals that are wanting to be involved. Of course, it's all on IPFS. It's all transparent. There may be other websites that mirror the content, kind of like Hive and Steam do. So when you want to invite someone, you can invite them to join in the governance process. In order to participate in the governance process, you have to do so at least once a month, or you're removed from the governance process and no longer eligible to participate. So that's the first thing, is you're inviting people to participate in the governance process, to be in the meetings, to have a say in your community. And the community can reach consensus on disinviting bad actors, which is another important difference from Fractally versus Steam or Hive. If someone is reliably abusing the system, they're caught lying or manipulating or attempting to use deep fakes to be on multiple cameras at the same time, or just otherwise behaving in a subjective manner that the community reaches consensus is not desired, they can be removed from the governance process. They can still participate by posting content as an outsider. They can still participate by staking. They can participate by providing liquidity. There's lots of ways that they can participate in a community, but they won't be able to participate in the governance. And that's how we eliminate bad actors. And inability to eliminate bad actors is one of the reasons I think Hive and Steam struggled. There were some bad actors that were really harming the community and that drove away the good people, right? One bad apple spoils the bunch. And that's the immune system of an organization, right? You're building an organism here. And if you've got a cancer cell in there, you've got to get the cancer cell out, or it's going to spread and kill the whole organization. And that's actually counter to a lot of cryptocurrency culture, which says anyone can join at any time, and once they're joined, there's nothing you can do about it. As long as they've got the keys, it's theirs, no one's censored, that's great, but all the bad actors are going to come there because you can't get rid of them. And then they're going to drive away some of the good actors who say, I don't want to be around all those bad actors. There's a bunch of thieves and scammers and everything else in this community that, So I think that's a huge, huge difference, is you have to be invited to participate in the governance, and you can be disinvited from the process, which holds people accountable.
Okay, so we're getting into section 3. This one is on financial model, operating model. I've got a few quotes and just one question for each of the few quotes here. So quote, assuming a fixed, from the white paper, assuming a fixed size community, the inflation model is a fixed amount of respect per week, or 6% annually, whichever is greater. Now, Dan, is there an easy-ish way to explain that to a non-crypto savvy listener?
Sure. It's like Bitcoin mining blocks, assuming you're producing a fixed number of blocks every week. With Bitcoin, there's going to be 50 Bitcoin every single week, and that's how the Bitcoin inflation was. And the inflation rate could be really high because early on, because it's like after the first block, it's infinite inflation. The second one, it's 50% per 10 minutes inflation. But as the supply grows, the inflation rate slowly falls, even though you're producing the same amount of inflation per week. And so I had to caveat it by saying, assuming a fixed supply of users, of members, because if there's more members, we're allocating more respect, because it's the same number of respect per person. So in that sense, it starts out just like Bitcoin. Whereas with Bitcoin, eventually the rewards are halving every single 4 years, and the supply is growing, which causes the inflation rate to approach 0. With fractals, it's different. The inflation rate keeps falling until it gets to 6% per year, and then it stays at 6% per year. At that point in time, the ratio of how much respect everyone's earning is still going to be Fibonacci, but it might actually grow. You might be getting more respect per person, so that the increase in respect is consistent. And the rationale for that is that you need to past contributions decay. Something you contributed 10 years ago is not as relevant as contributing that exact same thing today. Because if no one's contributing anything today, an organization is dead. And so, 6% was chosen just because I'm doing everything in 6. We've got the hexagon, 6 members in your group, and all those other things. So 6% inflation is sort of discounts past contributions to present contributions. And it ensures that there's always incentive for people to contribute today. And instead of all the people that contributed in the past, they got their tokens and no one does anything today, and people wonder, why is the system failing? Why aren't we doing public goods anymore? Everyone's just sitting back hoping that the capital gains kick in and they profit, because no one's willing to invest in the present. And so that's why we said it's going to be minimum 6% inflation long term.
Okay, so maybe the step beforehand then, if I'm a community and I want to build a network of roads as a public good with my fellow citizens, how do I agree the amount of tokens that we're going to use in our Fractally?
Well, initially, it's literally 1 token per level 1 rank per meeting.
I see. So the tokens get minted or generated as you progress through the meetings and just allocating, and that's creating the tokens. I got it. Yep. Okay. So each fractal has its own respect token, And there is value. So this is again another quote. Each fractal has its own respect token, and there is value to being able to easily convert respect in one community into respect in another community. So my kind of the area of question there is how that there has to be a transparency of some kind of relative valuation, like an exchange rate from one currency to another. What needs to be visible between the communities to be able to agree on the fair exchange rate for one of their tokens for another token?
And the exchange rate is determined in the free market. There's an automated market maker that is operated by people who actually have equal respect for both communities. So if you're a Bitcoin fan and an EOS fan, you can, and you want to maintain half your respect in each, you can provide liquidity in the market maker and earn more Bitcoin or EOS by funding that. And that's because the community is actually allocating inflation to the people that are providing that liquidity, because they're taking risk, right? You've got risk of impermanent loss, you've got market volatility risk, and you're providing a service, and that service is valuable. The more liquidity there is between two networks, the stronger all the tokens are, the more valuable the tokens become, simply because there are people willing to stand there and say, I value this, and I'm willing to convert between Bitcoin and EOS, or Bitcoin and whatever your fractal's respect is, at based on market prices, and that's providing value. That's a person taking a stand there, and that gets subsidized with inflation.
So what, given that it's connected to public goods again, versus private goods, so it's not a marketplace with components, or just the general idea of being public goods. There's a token that has been created on the basis of a contribution to something that is freely available to everyone. Any suggestion, any idea of how that token builds value and maintains value? And maybe let's tie that to where the funding comes into. The white paper mentions sponsors of Fractalies, so people who are going to contribute actual funds into the Fractally. How does that tie in with the token value and the budget management of the Fractalies?
All right. Well, let's talk about the most fundamental value. All value is subjective. Okay. So let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is evidence that somebody burned electricity in the past, and they got this Bitcoin. It's got no other value other than, somebody did something in the past, and I'm going to buy credit for what they did in the past. So whoever owns Bitcoin today gets the credit for all the proof of work that's been done in the past, because they paid people for the credit. So Bitcoin is kind of like a receipt. And so if you change this to, say, a food bank, you're giving food to the food bank and they're giving receipts. Because you have that receipt, it's a way of advertising to the world, hey, I gave to this food bank. And people say, wow, you're a great person, you gave to the food bank. Now, you can sell that receipt to someone, and now they get credit for what you gave to the food bank. Because you sold them your receipt for donating to the food bank. Food bank being public cause, it's clearly not benefiting you, right? It's complete charity. And it's sort of a way of, I gave in the past, but actually I'd like some of that back. Anybody else want to give me some money back for what I gave in the past? And now you can, right? You're not getting a complete refund, but you might get a partial refund for what you gave to the food bank, for someone who values the social standing that is associated with giving to the food bank. Now that's a pure charity case. But if instead of a food bank, it is, hey, I helped build the wall that surrounds this town. Now you're getting two forms of value, right? The social credit for, hey, I actually helped build the wall. I showed up every single day and I was laying bricks. And so I said, well, I didn't lay bricks, but I paid the guy who's laying bricks. That's what it is. It's a receipt that you did something. And the other thing is you've got the brick wall around the place. Now, suppose that brick wall had a gate in it, and anyone who wants to go in or out of that gate has to pay a fee. Well, now there's more value and more people that start using this as a form of currency. Now it gets monetary value, which is above and beyond utility value and social value. So there's all these different forms of subjective value that come into why something like Bitcoin has value that gives each community money value. And now, what's the biggest thing that you can do for public good is something that's going to cause the community's respect to grow, the value of outsiders' value of the community's opinion, because the community only has its own opinion. And the more people that value the community's opinion, the more value the tokens have. And so anything you do that causes outsiders to value your community's opinion more, you're more fair than other places, you're better at protecting property rights than other places. All those things add value to your token being used as a currency or as a medium of an exchange. And everyone benefits because it's public good.
Yeah, so those outsiders do have visibility on the respect tokens and what they're connected to, the public goods in some way, whether it's detailed or not. But there has to be not just some visibility, but there has to be a marketplace for exchanging and trading that value. And I think the only way that happens, because it's not going to be exchanging value in order to pay for public goods, because public goods are freely available. Therefore, the value of the token comes from exchanging the token for things that are not public goods, right? Private goods. So it's paying for goods and services that somehow in a economic free market, whatever, controlled market, a marketplace. So is Fractally going to facilitate building that marketplace for respect tokens and any other color to add there?
Fractally is producing smart contracts that allow people to deploy decentralized exchanges to do these types of things. Fractally will not be an exchange in itself, but we will definitely provide people the tools to engage in that type of activity as they need to.
Is there anything else to add, Dan, about how this brings opportunity for developers, founders, or investors?
Wow, there's opportunity for anyone who's got a cause, whether it's a religious cause or a charitable cause or even a business cause. Let's say you're a grocery store and you're a health food store and you want to promote healthy eating to drive business and brand awareness, or let's say you're a celebrity, right? You're a band and you have all these groupies. You can have a fractal for your band of who's doing the most to promote your band. And it's a community fan club driven, self-starting kind of thing to help promote the band versus issuing a security or selling shares or to raise money to pay for traditional advertising. Now, this is more of a social thing of people reaching consensus on who's the biggest fan or who's doing the most to raise awareness of healthy eating or whatever the case may be. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're a community organizer or you're someone who's looking for a side gig, all those people have something they can gain from Fractally.
That's clear. So let's move on now to section 4, which is blockchain application specifically. Then we close out with section 5 on the kind of the big picture vision and round off there. So I've got again a little list of questions here in terms of blockchain applications. First one: does Fractally depend on having a blockchain, or can it function despite a blockchain? And we've actually covered that earlier. So any group can get involved. You gave the example of being able to organize communities using a pack of cards. So blockchains are not needed. So maybe we move on. How could Fractal get applied in existing blockchain governance systems? Is that a clear enough question to respond to?
So all blockchains have some kind of governance process, even Bitcoin. It's just less visible than transparent ones. So delegated proof of stake, like BitShares and Hive and EOS, everyone gets to see the votes. Everyone knows what's happening, and it's relatively transparent. Bitcoin, you've got major influencers, right? You've got core developers, you've got exchanges, you've got all these parties that, there's some kind of power structure that's not necessarily obvious, but if all those people manage to reach consensus, they can actually hard fork Bitcoin, and that's happened on a number of occasions. Ethereum has also got something like that. They've got a foundation. They've got Vitalik as a leader who a lot of people give a lot of weight to. So there's governance processes going everywhere, and the fractal process ensures that systems mature to decentralization and that power stays distributed in the people instead of maturing to centralization, where the power over the Bitcoin's future lies in who controls the mining hardware with energy subsidies from nation states, or the major exchanges, or the couple mining pools that get increasingly centralized. The people using Bitcoin have no say over the how it's governed, and it's governed by increasingly small or decreasingly small number of people. So that's why every blockchain needs a governance process. So what I would propose and have proposed for blockchains like EOS is that instead of using stake-weighted voting to pick the people who are producing blocks and have say over blockchain system parameters and hard forks, you use the fractal governance process to select to identify the people who are contributing the most, right? The people who have the most merit, who are doing the most for the community. Those are the people that get to appoint the people who are producing blocks, and those are the people who get to make decisions about which smart contracts or system contracts to deploy. When do we hard fork? Which means that the block production process is more of a service, a defined service, rather than a governance role. And so we can evolve blockchain governance from proof of stake to proof of contribution. And I think that can actually be more decentralized, because stake is Pareto distributed, with 1% owning 51% of the stake, which means they have 100% of the control, which means blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatnot are going to be more centralized than the Federal Reserve at the end of the day as the system matures, because they don't have a process in place that ensures and protects the independence and makes sure that the people who are contributing are actually represented. And that's a huge difference. So I think the fractal process is relevant to every single blockchain, and they can either do the governance on a different chain like EOS, or they can implement it on their own chain. So basically, Fractally.com can provide this as a service for, like, Bitcoin's not going to upgrade to add smart contracts to be able to do this. But through Fractally.com, everyone in the Bitcoin community could reach consensus on who's the biggest contributors to the Bitcoin cause. And then depending on if people are willing to respect that consensus, it could impact how which transactions are allowed to be included in Bitcoin blocks if all the mining pools respect the consensus of this other community. And then mining becomes a formality for Bitcoin instead of the governance process.
So what do you see as the objections or the challenges for chains adopting Fractally? What would their hesitancy be, or what learning curve do other blockchains have to go through in order to understand the benefit, the value of Fractally?
Well, it's a new idea, and not everyone agrees with the principles or even understands all the principles. And a lot of people have the mindset, inflation bad, don't dilute me. And so when people sign up for a particular blockchain, their idea is they're signing up for something that exists. And the longer something exists, the less people want to change it. There's more risk associated with changing it. So the biggest challenge for any existing blockchain community is, are they going to adapt and try something new, or are they going to stick with what they know and allow somebody else to try something new instead? And that's the beauty of blockchains. It allows lots of experiments to go on, and then the market can figure out what's valuable. If the market determines that hey, a fork makes sense, then a fork makes sense, and then they can value each side accordingly. And that's how DAOs make decisions, is things get forked and one group goes one way and another group goes another.
Okay. You've talked around this. I'm going to ask the question just for the sake of clarity. So you mentioned Pareto. So since Pareto distribution in proof of stake and delegated proof of stake blockchains lead to a capture of the chains by the wealthy or the token aggregators such as exchanges, can Fractally be used to reduce this risk of capture of the chains?
Absolutely. Fractally can completely eliminate the capture by exchanges or by proof of work or by any Pareto distributed wealth.
Okay.
There's only one way to reliably control a fractally governed community, and that is to give more to the community than everyone else. And as soon as you stop giving, you lose control.
So if the chains are directing some of the token inflation towards a fractally, right? Is it clear how that leads? Like, does that necessarily lead to value for the chain that in terms of token price, or is that unrelated? How do you see the inflation being absorbed by the chains in terms of their tokenomics?
Well, it all depends on who's invited, right? The people that are governing are going to determine the fate of their currency. How much are people respecting the decisions that are made? So if you have a existing blockchain like EOS, it can use EOS as the respect, right? It doesn't have to have a new token. It can just start allocating EOS to the people participating every week. Now EOS has a social contract of maximum 5% inflation. Some of that inflation is already accounted for to go to block producers and other systems. But in principle, if you took that inflation and you had allocated it to an organization of people that people had confidence in, were using that to grow the respectability of the token, the trust people have in the token, then it could succeed. On the other hand, if you have a group of people that's inviting people all intending on colluding to just take the token and extract inflation and not actually give anything back, then it could fail. And there's no escaping the DNA of a culture. So who you invite, their principles, their values, their sense of fairness is going to impact the outcome. If you ask a bunch of monkeys to use the fractal process or do democracy, it's not going to work. If you bring democracy to a country that's used to tyranny, they might have no idea how to vote and might actually harm themselves. But if you, in the hands of the right people, the fractal process can reflect the consensus of those people. And if those people have a consensus that is wise, that supports things that are good and healthy, then it will thrive. If the consensus is corrupt in some sense, right? For example, you got a bunch of socialists that just want to do a UBI, universal basic income, and not expect anyone to contribute, and don't want to, are intentionally trying to flatten the Pareto curve. You might not get the results of another community which is highly focused on actually recognizing the merit of the contributors. So the DNA of the people participating in the governance process is as important as the software, because the software is just a tool in the hands of the people, and the people are what give everything value.
All right, just to wrap up this section on blockchain applications, you've mentioned EOS a number of times. Do you want to speak directly to what Fractally can deliver to the EOS chain? Is there any specifics that you want to call out?
I've proposed to the EOS chain that they migrate to a fractal governance process and ideally allocate as much inflation to such a process as possible. The challenge that the EOS network faces is it's got very diverse international audience, different time zones, different languages. The fractal governance process only works with people that can actually talk to each other, right? They have to have some commonality. So it's really ideal for people that can meet at similar times and speak a similar language with ideally an accent that is close enough that you can understand. And that's more decentralized than an international system with a whole bunch of people that can't actually talk. How can you reach consensus with people that have 180-degree culture from you, right? Cultures are so incredibly different, and they speak a completely different language from you. So the problem with a lot of existing cryptocurrencies, and it's also a benefit, but is that they are international and the cultures are so broad that any change is going to upset some or empower others, right? So if, let's say you had an English-speaking group that was building Fractally and trying to govern EOS, that would be a real problem because, well, what about all the Koreans and Chinese and so forth that own EOS? They don't have a voice in the governance of EOS. And whether or not they want to stay will depend on whether or not they have faith and confidence that those people that are participating in governance are actually benefiting the value of the token and they're willing to hold even without having any power. And they're willing to subsidize with inflation those people that are actually doing the work in a different time zone, speaking a different language. So that's the biggest challenge with taking an existing blockchain and migrating it to fractal governance, is that the set of interested parties might not be willing to agree to give it to one time zone or one language. And the best that they could try to do is to create multiple fractals within one chain and then attempt to allocate inflation differently. But then how do you do it? Do you based on population size, or 50-50, half English, half Chinese, or stake weighted? Well, 80% of the stakes in China, so they get 80% of the inflation. And then how do you judge the relative contributions of the English versus Chinese community? It's really, really hard, which is why it almost makes more sense for each fractal to start off with an initial group of people, to invite the people that actually want to participate, they opt in, and then to grow as people see what's happening and they opt in, rather than attempting to change from the outside. But if a blockchain had the guts and the drive to actually go forward and implement it, I think that it would be a game changer for any community.
Sure. So the question there is, do you currently feel that the white paper clarifies and describes the benefits well enough for blockchains to understand, or is that a work in progress, knowing how to communicate what Fractally can deliver for blockchains?
Someone once told me that it's like rules to a game. Until you actually play the game, it's hard to see the value of the game or even to understand the rules. Right? You have to play a practice game just to really get a feel for it. Some people are experiential learners, others audio, others visual. And so we need more content. We need more experimentation. That's the only way for people to really understand it. The white paper explains all the information, but as we've seen, you've read the white paper, and some of the things that are clearly stated in the white paper did not jump out, or the significance were not able to jump out. And that's because if I were to really try to get it to stand out, I'd have to create a 1,000-page book where I explain it from 50 different angles, and that would take a really long time to do so, because that's just how different people have different backgrounds. They relate it to different things, and so it's just going to take time. I will say is that I released the white paper, and the very next weekend, a group of community members said, let's just get this party started and let's start having weekly Zoom calls. I said, that's a great idea. And so we've started doing that, and we've already learned a lot. We've had 2 weekly meetings so far, the first one with 10 people, the next one with 50 people. We are keeping track or attempting to keep track as much as we can in a manual process, so that when the eventual system comes out, people can recognize those who have contributed into proving the process, even in a subjective, completely manual process. And so far, I've gotten a lot of good feedback. We've learned a lot of things, and we've learned that we can reduce the amount of time meetings take from an hour to 45 minutes. Now, maybe that's just selection bias because it's so early on and it's not really hard yet. But it's taught us the best algorithms to use for the meetings. One that seems to stand out best is everyone agrees on the biggest contributor, and then the next, and then the next. And some of these things are just experimental as we experience it, right? We've learned that we probably don't want to go to 5 consecutive meetings. We're just going to go up to a maximum of 3 rounds. And that means that no one has to worry about being on a call for 5 hours. Instead, they only have to allocate a 2.5-hour slot, which is like allocating time for a movie once a week, right? That's the level of effort, worst case, that you're committing to the process. There's lots of things that we're learning from experiment. And if you're interested in learning, you can join these meetings, talk with other people. And what you're ranking people on is their ability to contribute to the idea and the evolution of Fractally, the education of people about how the process works, translating things to different languages, providing ideas, inviting more people to join the process. That's what we're ranking people on subjectively, which should produce this body of information and knowledge to help more people understand the concept. And that's a public good. Understanding fractal governance is a public good, because if everyone understood fractal governance, there would be a revolution tomorrow. And all of a sudden the people would regain the power over their countries instead of being subjected to the powers that be.
So that takes us forward into the final section of vision, right? I've got here a little bit more in terms of this public goods versus private goods. I'm just curious if there's something kind of in the back of your mind of what weighting do you see public goods having in a future benevolent economy versus the private goods industry? Is it still kind of, is that irrelevant? Is that unknowable? Do you have a picture that public goods should actually be a bigger portion of a global economy? And again, back to the question of funding, even with the blockchains, they already have mechanisms for allocating money to contributors. So we're converting some of the economic value that is being generated in blockchains over to the allocation of the respect tokens and using the money generated by chains into the budget that's available for the Fractally process. Again, maybe that ties in. How do you see the future of a good global economy happening, balancing public goods versus private goods and that budget system?
Well, in theory, imagine the US dollar were to adopt this. You take the dollar supply of, I don't even know what it is these days. It's doubled so much recently, but however many trillions of dollars it is, and then you take 5 to 6% of that, and that's basically the budget that we're giving for the government to spend. And it's a capped budget. They can't borrow money. They can't do anything else. All they can do is reach consensus of which people in the community are doing the most for the public good of the country, and so forth. And so that would be the amount of spending on public goods. Now, in theory, there'd be less graft. So for the same budget, you're getting more public goods with this model that actually benefits what the public wants instead of what politicians and the special interests that are bribing the politicians or that are blackmailing the politicians want. And so I think that there's lots of opportunity to improve on the efficiency of the allocation of capital, the fairness of the allocation of capital, and to simultaneously restrict the hands of government to a fixed budget so they can't tax people to death. And if you did that, then it could grow, to manage entire countries with a budget and get more public goods for the same money. So I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
Got it. What are your measures of success for Fractally? How will you know that it's working or needs adjustment in a significant, like a structural way? What signals are you looking for? What metrics, what key performance indicators?
Weekly active users combined with token prices.
Weekly active users combined with token prices. Got it.
Yep.
Fantastic. Is there anything that I haven't asked, anything else in your mind that you'd like to explain as we conclude the conversation?
I think you've asked a lot of really good questions. I hope I've clarified things for you and your audience. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share the ideas of Fractally with the world.
And it's Fractally, Fractally, and is it a .com, the website?
Fractally.com, yes.
Fantastic. Okay.
Fractally needs to do things in a fractal-like manner. So it's fractal, LY.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the interview, the conversation, Dan.